Hello, we're glad you've joined us for this live webinar, Acclimation of Training Animals for Standard Handling, Restraint, and Laboratory Techniques. I am Christina Mahalik of LabRoots, and I'll be moderating this session. Today's educational web seminar is presented by LabRoots, the leading scientific social networking website and provider of virtual events and webinars advancing scientific collaboration and learning. It's brought to you by LabRoots. To learn more, visit labroots.com. Let's get started. You can pose questions to the speaker during the presentation while they're fresh in your mind. To do so, simply type them in the Q&A box, which will open once you click on the green Q&A button located at the lower left of the presentation window. Questions will be answered after the presentation. To enlarge the slide window, click on the screen icon in the lower right-hand corner of the slide window. If you experience technical problems seeing or hearing the presentation, just click on the support button found at the top right of the presentation window, or report your problem by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the screen. This is an educational webinar, thus offers free continuing education credits. After the webinar is over, please click on the CE button located in the bottom left-hand corner of your webpage and follow the process for obtaining your credits. It is my pleasure to now present today's speaker, Senior Training Specialist Kaile Bennett, University of Michigan Training Corps. Kaile Bennett began working in laboratory animal medicine in 2008, but her passion for animals steadily grew from a young age. Kaile graduated from Eastern Michigan University with a Bachelor's of Science in Behavioral Psychology. Shortly after graduation, she joined the University of Michigan as a laboratory animal technician, quickly obtaining her Registered Laboratory Animal Technologist certification. Kaile formed the Animal Enrichment Committee, creating various programs in socialization and enrichment for rodents and large animals. As a senior animal technician, she transitioned into a position with the Biomedical Engineering Department, overseeing a population of rhesus macaws, felines, and rabbits. Kaile participates in ALAS locally and nationally, serving on the Michigan ALAS Executive Council. She completed various scientific posters, presentations, authored a book, and co-authored multiple manuscripts. She recently accepted an opportunity to share her knowledge as a training specialist. Kaile implemented a compassion fatigue peer support group and volunteers for the lab animal community through public outreach. She was named National ALAS 2016 Technician of the Year. Specialist Bennett will now begin her presentation. Kaile, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for such a great introduction. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I really hope that you guys can take a lot from this and from our program. Before we begin, I would like to say that everything in this presentation is per the guide for the care and use of laboratory animals. Has been approved by our IA cook at the University of Michigan and is on protocols just before we begin. All right. Oops, too fast. Hold on one second. So I would first like to start by introducing the training corps population at the University of Michigan. We have 8 dedicated training specialists with a variety of backgrounds in laboratory animal care, including surgery, anesthesia, technical experience, husbandry experience. We're all very diverse backgrounds with rodents and large animals. We also have a fairly large animal count for our training corps. We have 15 rats about 15 rats at any given point in time. You can see in the picture we have our rats housed in groups of 4 in rat condos. We have approximately 140 boxes of mice, and those can have anywhere from 2 to 5 mice in them, and our population does fluctuate slightly during the year. We have 8 rabbits and 8 guinea pigs. We do offer large species training, but this is on demand, so we'll occasionally get a large species in for a short period of time. But with those, we often like to use the lab's current animal population. With all that being said, we will be expanding our training course soon, potentially doubling the number of animals in the next 2 years and adding more training specialists as well. So with our large population, we are also looking at expansion. Where we get our animals from, we do like to practice the 3 R's from the ALS, mainly the reduction of laboratory animals. We have 2 colonies on campus, the germ-free colony and our breeding colony. And most of the training corps animals are surplus animals from these colonies. The germ-free colony breeds animals in a germ-free setting and often have surplus animals. And our breeding colony, ran by breeding managers, breed hard-to-breed strains and for our labs community. And when they have excess animals, we are often able to take those as well. That accounts for about 80% of our animal population. When we have a direct need that those colonies can't fulfill, or we need a specific strain or color of animal, we will go through vendor, usually the Charles River vendor. But most of our animals are transfer animals from surplus colonies. With all of those animals, we have a wide variety of topics that we cover in the training corps. We cover all husbandry training, so all of our husbandry staff go through our training corps, and this is to train basic animal care, handling, equipment maintenance, and documentation and record keeping. We do laboratory animal handling for our lab staff, so how to handle our animals properly and restrain for different techniques. And those techniques, I have a small list here. This is by no means a conclusive list of the techniques that we train at the training corps, but these are some of the more common ones. We train injections, gavage, blood collection, surgery and anesthesia, necropsy and dissection, and basic animal training. But pretty much one of our mottos is, if you need to be trained on it, we can train you or we can find someone that can. We have a very large veterinary staff. We have both faculty veterinarians and resident veterinarians, so we have a lot of knowledge pool that we can pull from. So the techniques that we don't know, we learn from them and they can help us out. So we've never really had a training request that we couldn't fulfill. What does this all mean? Well, we have a growing animal population that's already quite large, and we have a heavy class load. This is through regulatory expectations that have been increasing, which has meant more classes for our labs because they need more education. We also have an increase in specialized technique requests, which means we have more specialty classes. And specialized techniques can often require more trainers and more animals, as those are a little harder to learn, and we kind of go through more animals during class as we're learning these specialized techniques with our lab members. So this kind of contributes to our growing population. So with all of this, with this large population, all of these classes and all of these specialized techniques, we found we had some concerns to address in our training corps. Namely, we really want to reduce the stress in our training corps animals. Some of them were a little difficult to handle. Maybe they weren't used as often as other animals in our population, especially if they at first showed that they were a little difficult. Because a lot of handlers that we get in class are novice handlers and are already kind of concerned about handling animals. And when the animals act a little fractious, they tend to shy off even more. And therefore, there is potential for overuse for the animals that are easier to handle and a little easier to use in class. This also leads into varying student comfort level. We have a wide variety of lab staff on campus at the University of Michigan. We have a lot of students that have decades of experience and they're principal investigators who just need a refresher. And we have some people who've never even handled an animal at all before, let alone a rodent species, and might be even phobic about rodents. So it runs the gamut in our classes. And we want to make sure that our animals don't experience any stress with these varying comfort levels and all of this experience. So we came up with some solutions in the training corps to help with this. We have an acclimation and positive reinforcement program for our animals. We do environmental enrichment enhancement for all of the animals that we house. We have practiced a few methods of technique refinement for these handlers from the labs to reduce stress on the animals, but also to reduce stress for our lab members. We are also currently working on an enhanced database to streamline our data management and make sure that we cycle through our colony effectively and use all of the animals we have. So, well, how do we start? That's a lot. That's a long list of things that we want to get, we wanted to accomplish in our training corps, and again, with a fairly large and diverse population. So I'd like to start this presentation with some of the global methods that we do for our animal population for all of the species that we house. And this is just a little picture of a basket we have in our lab space with various training corps animal toys that we can give to our animals to kind of make the experience more pleasant and more enriching for them. There's a lot of our methods are universal for our species. One of our more popular programs that has really had a lot of success is our acclimation program. And this is just handling acclimation for our animals once they're transferred to our colony in the lab space that we give classes. So they get used to the environment and used to the handling. Sometimes they haven't been handled much at all. Oftentimes they're very young before they're actually put in class and potentially put in restraints. So there's less stress in class. They've been in our room before and they've been handled, and they know us as the trainers. And we also allow them to sit in on classes, and that just means when they come into our training corps, they kind of sit in their cages next to me while I give class before they're actually in the class, so they can get used to the sights, the sounds, the smells of being in a class with a lot of people before they're actually participating in that class. And this gives us easier animals to handle. It's less stress on the animal, and it's also easier to perform classes and techniques on these animals. And one of my favorite points of this is we often strive to push our lab to really acclimate their animals to handling and to the lab environment before they use them for research. And by doing this in our classes, we model acclimation for our research staff. Not only do we say it benefits them, they can see the benefit for them and for the animals, but they can also see how much easier it is to do their techniques and to handle animals that are acclimated to handling. So this is just kind of another way to drive home that point that animal welfare equals better science. And this is kind of one of my silly slides, but in Jurassic Park, one of blockbuster movie in the 90s, all of the dinosaurs in the park are female, and we social house all of our social species, which is all of our species in the training corps. And we make sure all of the rats and rabbits in training corps are female. We also don't want them to breed, but more importantly, we do this because rats and rabbits, the female rats and rabbits tend to be smaller as they age than the males. And we want to keep all of our social groups together for these animals. We don't want to have to separate even into pairs from our rats of groups of 4. And we're able to keep our cage density sizes the same with these animals and don't have to worry about them outgrowing caging and have to find new caging or potentially break up social groups. So we make sure that all the rats and rabbits are female in our training corps to make sure that we're keeping up with social housing. With the mice and the guinea pigs, this doesn't seem to be too much of a concern. We can keep our social groups fairly well with both sexes. And we also offer extra in-cage enrichment for all of the species. At the University of Michigan, all animals must have at least 1 piece of enrichment. And all of our training corps animals have at least 2 pieces, if not more, in their cage. And in this picture, we have 2 rats in the standard shoebox style caging. But they have 3 different enrichment devices in their cage, which makes a barren environment much more interactive and allows them to display natural behaviors that they normally wouldn't be able to. And I'll just kind of point out, one rat is in an opaque hut-like tube that is very reminiscent of a burrow that they would normally be in. There's a gnaw block that they can chew on. There's also EnviroDry, that crinkly bedding paper that mice especially love to nest in, but the rats tend to like to burrow under it and kind of get under it instead of nesting. This demonstrates all enrichment types. Again, our lab members get to see all of these enrichment types, and they get to see the animals interacting with them and displaying natural behaviors that maybe the labs haven't seen the animals display before. You don't see the rat burrowing if there's nothing to burrow in, and you don't see them gnawing except on their food if there's nothing to gnaw on. So we get to show them this is why enrichment's important, and this is what your animals naturally would like to do in the wild, so they can see the more natural behaviors. With all of this, we also evaluate enrichment items for our Animal Enrichment Committee. We have a very robust Animal Enrichment Committee. There's many technicians, veterinary technicians, veterinarians on the staff of the Animal Enrichment Committee. And there's a lot of ideas from all of those staff members. There's a lot of people with a lot of different ideas, and they have to be evaluated to be effective for the animals. So first thing, they have to go through, obviously, past safety and health concerns through our veterinary staff. But then at the training corps, we get to test drive those after they're deemed safe to see if they're effective as enrichment. And I have one example down there. One of our technicians came up with an idea that they thought the rodents would really enjoy cotton swabs. They seemed to like gnawing, and there was a gnaw stick on those cotton swabs, and then there's cotton on the tips, much like a cotton square that you would give a mouse or a rat to make a nest out of, like nestlet. And it took us a while actually to find cotton swabs that didn't have bleach in them. We finally found some organic cotton swabs. Passed through the vets. There was no chemicals in them. And then it came to us to see if the animals would actually use them. I thought it was a great idea, and we gave it to both mice and rats, and I will say both species love them. They pick them up, they take them right to their nest, and then they destroy them in about 5 minutes, and you can't see that they were even in the cage. So we found that they liked them and that it was enriching, but it wasn't really effective as an in-cage enrichment item because they disappeared within 5 minutes, and you couldn't really use that as a very long-term enrichment item. So it's on the database as safe and effective, but not really realistic in our setting. And I actually kept the box that they gave me, and I give them as treats to our training corps animals that already have the enrichment. But that just demonstrates another way that the training corps really tries to be on the forefront and cutting edge of innovative enrichment and animal welfare issues, so we can demonstrate these for our labs and so that we can be on the forefront for our animals. We also offer high-value treats to all of our species. We make sure all the treats obviously are species appropriate, though we do have a lot of kind of overlap with our species. They get treats after every training event and usually beforehand when they first come into our training space. And I have a few pictures. One of our more popular ones are the BioServe foraging mixes. We can just sprinkle that in rodent bedding and they can forage for it as well. We have the Mardi Gras foraging mix pictured here and the fruit and veggie medley. Those are our two most common. For the rabbits and guinea pigs, we also offer them fresh fruits, vegetables, herbs, just different types of fresh foods that they can deconstruct, and it can be really enriching for them. And I did add a little caveat here about nut allergies. As I said, we have a very large and diverse lab staff that come in for training. And it was brought to my attention that the Mardi Gras foraging mix had quite a bit of peanuts in it. And I know that there's a lot of allergies out there to different types of foods, but peanut allergy is very common, and it can be very, at times, deadly, and that we don't screen people for allergies before they come to class. So we did make the decision to keep that specific foraging mix for just when it's the training corps with the animals or people that we know. And we use the fruit and veggie medley when there's a class. And I like to highlight this to keep in mind that the enrichment in the food that you give the animals have to interact well with the animals and with the users and handlers of the animals that are also in their environment. They have a very large interactive environment in the lab space, and we have to keep all of that in mind before we give them things. We also use human interaction for our animals, and this is a lot like acclimation handling, right? Like getting them used to being handled. But I like to highlight this especially with rats. We do have a contact through the breeding colony. There's a lab that is continuously breeding rats, and they only need the males. So we get the females from their litters, and we get them quite young. And you can see that adorable little weanling rat right there. And when we get them, we handle them frequently, mainly for our handling acclimation program, but also because they're adorable. And you can see in the other picture, there's an adult rat being very interested and active while being handled. And we've noticed that the rats tend to view human interaction as enriching. They like coming out of their boxes, and when we open their cage, they climb right out and onto our arms. It seems very enriching to them to have that relationship with us rather than just tolerating it through acclimation. So we do count that as a type of enrichment. We don't officially count it, but it does seem to be very enriching. They do that little purring, chittering thing the rats do when they're happy when we squish their heads, and they kind of burrow right into our arms and stay with us during class. So we find that's very enriching for them and for us as well. I mean, the rats are adorable, so that's another thing that we offer them. And kind of segueing from that, we do have some species-specific things for our animals. Some species are different, but that we do in the training corps to really make them more comfortable. And these pictures may look a little silly. We have one of our trainers, Lawanda, came up with a great idea speaking of the different varying comfort levels of our students, we've had a few students when they come to class and they see I have a live rat, won't enter the room. They have very phobic of rats, specifically rats. You know, they're larger, they have that long pink tail. We have all albino rats, so they have red eyes. And we have people that won't even enter the room. And she came up with a great idea. We got a lot of really colorful, kind of goofy looking socks, and we cut 4 holes for their legs. And then we only really had to put it on them twice before they would start to just kind of run in. I think it reminds them of a burrow. They seem to really like being in these sweater socks. And because they lie right down and they're very calm in them, and it hides their tail. And it kind of makes them look, you know, kind of like a stuffed animal, right? They look a little silly. But every time we've had somebody who is phobic of rats to the point of not entering the classroom, we've done this, and they've always come in after that and started handling the rats after a while because they're not as scary looking. And a lot of people say, oh, they look just like little stuffed animals. And then once we get them handling, we just slowly take that sweater off and show them it's the same animal that you were afraid of. And then we can go ahead with the class. We've had a really good success with that. We don't have to do it often, but when we do, we find it's very successful. Now, besides that, when we train our classes, we have surgical tables that the animals are on that the lab members can demonstrate the different techniques and restraints. And we found with the rats specifically, they tended to not like being on those tables, right? They were kind of scritching around and seemed like they were looking for footing. So we just took some washcloths and laid them on the table. We also noticed the tables kind of seemed a little cold, so we thought maybe the washcloths would buffer from that cold and give them something to grip onto. We put them on the washcloths and they automatically calm down and just kind of sit there and let us, you know, handle them appropriately. So we do that in all our classes now, just as something extra for the animals to keep them even more calm and to reduce their stress levels. We also have another idea for novice handlers. We call it our shoe cover restraint. And it's simply we take a standard shoe cover that's made of like the porous cotton-like material, not the plastic ones. We have the rat enter the shoe cover going towards the toe end, or where you would put your toe if you were using it as an actual shoe cover. And we find that you can really restrain them easily in this way. A lot of people get intimidated by rats. They're larger than mice. They're worried about getting bitten. They're worried about being able to manipulate their hands properly over such a large animal. And so this really helps by calming the rats down. Again, they seem to really like being in the shoe cover. In the second picture, I couldn't get that rat out of the shoe cover. And it calms them down, and it lets the handler have some more control of keeping those animals restrained. You can see this rat is being restrained for a potential subcutaneous injection. The rat could go in all the way, and you can pull out just one leg for potentially an intramuscular injection, or you could turn the rat over quite easily for intraperitoneal injection. So those are some of our more basic techniques that we train, and it really helps out with restraining the rat and allowing people to manipulate to get to the proper areas on that rat. And again, the rat seems to really like it. We sometimes put them back in the cage in those and wait for a little bit until they decide to find out. Also for our rats, we've just recently, within a little past 6 months or so, started using rat condos instead of the standard shoebox style caging. In the standard shoebox style caging, we could fit about 2 adult female rats quite comfortably. But we wanted to try to give them a larger social group and to give them a more dynamic environment. Rats prefer a dynamic environment. So Allentown made us these great cages, these rat condo cages for the University of Michigan, and we were trying them out at the training corps. You can see there's more floor space. You can fit more enrichment. So there's a gnaw block. There's something wire dry in this box. Off camera a little bit, there's a hut in the far up corner. You can also see there is a platform that they can get on, and there's an access port, and they can kind of jump up on that platform. And you can see in that second picture, they all really like being on the platform. They're very interactive with each other on it, and we get to see and show labs, again, the different behaviors our animals can show. They can jump, they can navigate an environment, they can manipulate an environment that has something to manipulate. And we get to have a larger social group and show that these animals are really quite social. We haven't had any aggression so far in these cages. Again, we do have females that were introduced young, but it's been a really good success and a really good addition to our training course so far. Moving on to our rabbits, I haven't really spoken much about our rabbits, but we do have, again, 8 long-term rabbits are on our colony. They're female and they are pair-housed, and we have standard Allentown caging for this. We just remove the middle panel for 2 cages and give them access. They do tend to kind of hang out in their own cages sometimes. You can see in that picture, though they're pair-housed, they're in their own cages. And so in the training corps, we give our animals weekly exercise. Now, this is initially to obviously promote natural gaits and movements, allow them to get a couple hops in one step, and also to reduce their energy levels a little bit during class, so they're not so difficult to handle for our lab staff, especially ones that haven't handled rabbits before. These can be pretty large rabbits. But we also noticed that it increased their social interaction because they had more, again, dynamic environment to interact with. You can see we first put them in and they're kind of sniffing around, and then they get together and start eating the treats and playing with the different toys and really interacting more in that larger setting. So we've really noticed some benefits to this. Besides that weekly exercise for our training corps rabbits, we also do offer them, we call it rabbit playtime in the training corps lab. We bring them to our training corps space, and the cat carriers are used to coming in for classes. We get the same playpen they had in their housing room, and we put it in the space where we would hold class with them. We offer a variety of enrichment for them and trainer interaction, so they can interact with us and bond with us outside of a classroom setting. So they can be in that classroom when there's not all of the class members and different manipulations. They're just having fun. They're just being interacted with and given enrichment. And we get to bond with them as well, which we've really noticed increases the ease of handling them, and we also really enjoy it. And this is one of our trainers, Lawanda. She was petting and brushing them, offering them treats, and making just them generally easier to handle and work with. And we've noticed the rabbits really do tend to, we open up the carrier and they kind of come right out into our space now, whereas before they were a little apprehensive. Now for our mice, we always offer at least 2 pieces of enrichment like our other species, but for the mice, we make sure it's 2 pieces of nesting or shelter enrichment. And I put these pictures on for a reason. We gave them a nestlet or a cotton square to make into like a fluffy nest. We also gave them a shelter. And you can see they tore up the cotton square. But if you were to score that nest, it's actually a fairly poor nest score. They tore it up, but they otherwise kind of trampled on it and didn't really use it to make a nest. You can see I also gave them some foraging food, which they were sniffing at. But when we wasn't interacting with them, they were inside their huts. And this shows that we gave them choice between the nesting material or the hut or the shelter. And they chose the shelter as their preferred shelter, nesting or shelter enrichment. They tore up the other one, but they didn't really use it properly. This shows that you can give the animals choice, and it makes their environment less stressful, right? Because they got to use the preferred method. But it also lets us interpret and modify our enrichment. So now actually our rodents, after these pictures were taken, we gave our mice crinkly paper, or we call it EnviroDry, and nestlet, so they can make a more woven nest like they would in the wild. Or we can give them some EnviroDry in the huts. But just a nestlet alone without another piece of nesting material didn't seem to work for our colony. And we got to see that and have them tell us that, so we don't have to guess and figure out what they want in enrichment. If we give them choice, they have more control. And again, I like to show this to the lab staff so they can see that the animals do interact with their environment depending on what we give them to interact with. Also for mice, for technique refinement, this is our wires on the table idea. And you can see in this picture here, this is a ventilated caging that we had for most of our animals. Their food is in a hopper in the back. But this wire that we have right here is for our static caging that doesn't have ventilation through a port. So this is an upside down wire. It would be in a box that was holding a water bottle and food. So we just took it, flipped it upside down, and it's at a great angle to teach. We teach a scruff restraint for our mice, and it's at a great angle to teach this for novice handlers. It also gives the mice something to grip onto instead of that smooth surface, so they grip right onto that wire and kind of stay pretty still, so it's easier to hold on to them, and it's easier for them as well. We also, when we teach the scruff restraint, we have some lab members concerned that they might be pressing down too hard on the mice. And by doing this with the wires, it allows the mouse, the legs especially, to go somewhere when you're pressing down. So we are able to give the handler some peace of mind that you can push a little harder on these animals. You're not pressing into a solid surface. There's a surface with some give. And it's less stressful for the animals because it is a surface with some give if a handler is being a little, just learning the ropes of rough restraint. So we offer it as an option for our handlers. And we notice that a lot of them do take us up on using these wires. Excuse me. For our guinea pigs, we offer social housing in a drawer system. And this is because guinea pigs don't tend to use, excuse me. Guinea pigs don't tend to use levels like rats do. So we give them a lot of floor space. And this allows us to put more enrichment in their caging that they would actually use. So the drawers are pushed into a rack. Gives them some darkness in the back that they can retreat to. It also allows us to put huts, and you can see there's loose hay, and there's also toys that they can manipulate. On the front of all the caging, there are shower curtain rings that they can play with. But this allows us to house them in larger groups. It also allows us to give them the toys that are more proper for them to use as the first species. Especially for guinea pigs and rabbits, but we've noticed that guinea pigs especially tend to like fresh herbs. So we started what we call our administrative herb garden. So to our administrative staff that don't normally have interaction with our species or our animals, we are able to, if they have the overhead lighting like you see in this picture, we give them kits to grow the herbs that we have approved for our animals. So they get the pot and the dirt and the different seeds. And then they grow these herbs, and we've noticed this really forges a gap that the administrative staff have, that they can actually impact animal welfare. And the animals really love it. It's olfactory enrichment because the smells are really great, especially for the staff. And it really allows us to, kind of bridge that gap between our staff that don't have all of those interactions with the animals. It's been a very popular program, and our animals really seem to like it. We also do name our largest species. We name our rats, our guinea pigs, and our rabbits. The only reason we don't name our mice is because there's so many of them, and our population is a bit more rotating, so it's a little harder. We do notice it's easier to keep track of them. Now, this is an example. This is Mia and Cece. I know we have some kind of cutesy-looking designs near their names. Those actually do serve a purpose as well. Mia has a red tail, a mark on her tail, and Cece has a blue mark. We do have albino rats, so that makes it easier to tell them apart. And it's easier to talk about Mia having potentially an issue like Mia having alopecia instead of rat 345. And on the bottom, I did include a quote from Cindy Buckmaster. She is a past ALAS president, as well as she's very passionate and vocal speaker for public outreach for the animal research community. And she has had a quote in one of her papers: animals that are named and therefore seen as individuals may be tended more carefully. That makes them less stressed and better for study. And I tend to agree. We are more attached, and we get more attached to animals that have names. We remember them more, and I think that makes them less stressed and better for study. And again, I keep saying this, but I love to model that for labs. You don't have to name your animals, but that is an option. Some don't even think of it as an option. So that's a lot of information. It's a lot of animals. It's a lot of trainers. And that's a lot of different classes that we're training. How do we keep track of all of it? Well, our current system we use is a hard copy or a paper system. Our animals are only kept on our protocol for 1 year. We don't want to use geriatric animals during classes if it's a potentially stressful situation. But we have noticed some animals are used more than others. We have a rule on our protocol: every 3 techniques an animal gets, they get a week break, and we mark on their tails with a different color marker. But besides that, once they hit the week break is over, if it's an easier animal to work with, we notice that they tend to be used more, or if they're at a more apt location on the housing rack. We try to limit that as much as we can. We moved from a clipboard to putting our use logs in a binder to be able to flip back easier and see what animals use last. But it is very difficult, especially if you're short on time. So me and one of our administrative staff, Lisa Ludwig, have been working on a database, and this is a demo of one of the pages for that a cage would have for a animal colony management database. Now we'll be getting touchpad, like iPads or tablets to house this on, so we can take it into our housing rooms. You can see we have cage IDs, species, what building they are in their facility, when they arrived, what's their weight and age. Cage primary color, we notice this is very important to some of our lab staff when they practice tail vein injection or blood collection. In lighter colored animals, it's easy to see the tail vein, but if they're working with darker colored animals, they might prefer those as well. And then we have the status in the corner. If the animal has to have a week break, it's not active, but if it is active, the active is lit up. The green is lit up on this mock cage because at the University of Michigan, we use green plastic acetates on cage cards to delineate when an animal is being treated for a medical issue. So we want to know when our animals are being treated for medical issues because we try not to keep those in our colony too long, so we can use them for an acute procedure or look into them further. We can also see when they're retired after that year mark and when they're euthanized, so we can keep their files on board, but we don't have to have them in our active status. And here's another example of what it would look like if a cage was active, but a month from their retirement date. So we can start to plan our classes with our retiring animals and plan when we get transfers of new animals in, when we have an animal leaving our colony. So this is ongoing, and this should be up and running within a few weeks. So we're very excited for this, and I really think this will help out a lot. Using our colony effectively, animals will be listed on our database based on when they were used last, so it'll be a lot easier to manage and manipulate our colony. After retirement, we do offer in-house adoptions for our training corps animals. And I do like to put a note here, this does exclude transgenic models. So if we get an animal from the breeding colony, for example, and it's a potentially transgenic animal, we cannot adopt those out. However, otherwise, we do try to adopt out our animals, mostly rat and up, though we have adopted out mice. If we think we'll be adopting them, we do hold a last training class for veterinary residents, and this is just a standard physical exam that presses standard clinical techniques, injections, spay and neutering. All the animals are spayed and neutered. I have a couple examples here. That's my old rat Simon when we had male rats on training corps. He used to go to schools with me to teach, for public outreach to teach kids about animal research. That's my boss, Kirsa. She has 2 guinea pigs from our program. The vet residents love when we have guinea pigs because they're tricky under anesthesia, so they get a lot of experience when they spay and neuter them. And that's my dog, Beaker. That was one of our large animals that we got for a short amount of time to practice with. And then I adopted him out, and now he's a lump that lays on my stairs. But I really think it's important that we adopt these animals out so they can be good ambassadors for animal research. People ask me a lot when I walk my dog about where I got him from, and they can see these animals are happy and able to be adopted out. And again, we can do public outreach, etc. So we do only do in-house adoptions right now, but I really think it's a great asset to our program. So the results of all of these changes that we made for our program, the trainers are more invested in the animal population. We're excited to see them. We interact with them besides being in class, so we have a lot more investment in them. Our trainees get to see optimal care. They get to see all of this great innovation and enrichment and training that we can have for the animals, so they can know that there's a different way. Our animals' temperament have improved. They're easier to handle in class, and they generally are interacting with their environments more, or at least it seems anecdotally to us. Our animals are easier to identify. They have names, and it's more easy to communicate about them between all of our diverse training staff, and we're kind of spread across campus, so it's easier to give out information on the animals when they have names like that. Better care is better science. Our new regulations do require consistent training with our labs, so we see them more, and we see them more frequently. And of course, sets a precedent for staff for optimal care. I can't say that enough. We are the first people that anyone see when they enter a laboratory animal, be it husbandry, lab staff. If you're going to interact with animals, the first animals you see are the training corps. We have a duty to the animals to give that high value of care so they have that baseline of optimal care for animals. They see the best, and that's what they expect from there on out. And I think it's very important that we start people's careers that way. Our animals can handle a variety of techniques. Again, our specialty classes have been increasing, and we've had a lot of success while people are learning these specialty techniques that require a lot of minute handling ability with calmer animals. And therefore, their more advanced techniques can go through easier, and that our classes can go quicker. And more investment is a happier staff. I love these pictures. That's me with a rat. I really love the rats. That's my favorite program, so I'm constantly with the rats. That's Yolanda. She really likes the rabbits, and she was participating in that rabbit playtime. It's fun to talk about them when you've interacted with them. It's fun to share stories and come in and look excited to see both your coworkers and to, train in animal research, but also to see the animals and have that bond and that impact. All right, well, I'd like to acknowledge a few of our teams. The University of Michigan Unit for Laboratory Animal Medicine, that's the unit I am currently working under, and they're great with letting us try all these things as long as they're veterinary approved and really being on the forefront of laboratory animal welfare. The ULAM Training Corps team, which is my team, and it's a great team to work on. Everybody's so passionate and so invested, and it's just really exciting to see so much knowledge and experience on one team. The ULAM Breeding Colony and germ-free, I didn't forget to write them, but for our animal transfers that we get so we can practice that reduction in laboratory animal. The University of Michigan laboratory staff, I mean, we do have great classes. People really want to learn, and they really want to know how to handle laboratory animals properly and how to experience this the best way possible. And I'm really encouraged by seeing them. And the ULAM Animal Enrichment Committee, it's a great committee. They're very passionate. We have so many passionate people at the University of Michigan that just want to know as much as they can and be very innovative in the field. So with that, if there are any questions, this is Selma and Ruby. These are my two favorite rats interacting with their environment. Look, they're in that tube and they're eating the foraging food I gave them. So if there are any questions. I don't know what to do now.
Thank you, Kaile, for that really informative and very interesting presentation. A quick reminder for our audience on how to submit questions. Simply type them in the Q&A box found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of your presentation window. Specialist Bennett will answer as many questions as time permits. So with that, let's begin with our first question. Our first question asks, curious to know what caging type or manufacturer you use for the rats.
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, there I am. That's a great question. We actually, it's Allentown Caging, and I believe they're called rat condos, but then we do get our caging through Allentown.
Thank you. Our next question asks, for years I have experienced that after teaching investigators aseptic rodent surgery, most of them end up performing rodent surgery following poor aseptic technique. What have you done or do you do?
Is it back on me? Okay, there it is. There. Well, actually, that's a great question, and we have had that experience as well. Sometimes we put all this effort into training our lab staff, which seems to really impact them, seems to really kind of absorb in, and then we find out later that they're not following all the techniques we've displayed. So we do offer lab visits. So we will come in and if the labs request, and we can watch them perform surgery and make sure that they're doing it properly. However, if they are in trouble with our IA cook or there's some sort of citation that they're not following aseptic technique, the first thing they do is get retraining. And that's when we make ourselves known to them and go back to their labs and they come back to class. And we really stress the importance of following that aseptic technique. So I would highly encourage follow-up training for things like surgery and some of the more nuanced things that we train.
Our next question asks, what would be the roadblocks to introducing rat condos into the general research and animal population? Are there plans for this at the University of Michigan?
Well, there are some roadblocks, and we do have a list of pros and cons of these. So the animals really enjoy them, and we can house more animals together. However, they're very cumbersome to handle. I will say it's a larger cage and it's heavier. And on that perch, if they're on top of the perch and you take the cage top off, they do tend to kind of, if they want, they kind of jump out. So there are some issues or roadblocks. However, at the University of Michigan, we don't allow single-housed animals for reasons of size. So we do use these rat condos if animals, especially the male rats, get too large to be socially housed in the standard caging. We have this as an option. And I know that we're kind of weighing the benefits. So far, animal welfare is kind of winning out over some of the more rudimentary husbandry issues of handling them. So we are looking into different ways to implement this, but it is slowly being introduced into the main colony. And I will say, I think the roadblocks can be fixed fairly easily. And I think it's worth it for the animals because, again, it's a much more dynamic environment for those rats. So I would definitely encourage doing a test run like we did on just one rack of animals. That's a very standard population, like our training core animals, and listing out how it works and finding solutions that way instead of just kind of looking at the negative.
Great, and the questions keep rolling in. The next question asks, are new regulations requiring consistent training U of M regs?
Oh, yes, I should have clarified. As we're expanding as a university, those are University of Michigan regulations. We're starting to go into maintenance training. So once you are trained on something, looking into different like yearly training refresher courses and things like that. And we're also encouraging labs much more and through email and lab visits to come to us for training for specialized techniques. They're not required to have training through us for specialized techniques, but we are pushing it. And we're also making surgery training a requirement if surgery is on your protocol for anyone who has surgery experience, or who potentially could do surgery. So yeah, that is something through University of Michigan. But I've noticed it's slowly increasing since the 2011 edition of the Guide for Care and Use of Laboratory Animals came out. In general, there was a lot of different things in that guide, and so slowly, I guess it's been changing in our field, but recently at the University of Michigan.
Thank you. Next question asks, how long does the acclimation period for rodents last at your animal units?
Well, we don't have any quite set rule that they get an acclimation period for 3 weeks. We do try to kind of incorporate it as we're working with our animals. We have a large enough colony with our training corps. It's great that the University of Michigan has allowed us to have a large training corps colony that we can have animals kind of to the side for about a month while we're getting them used to handling and restraint before they're really put fully into the colony. But sometimes we do need them a little quicker than that. I try to keep encouraging acclimation handling throughout the duration in the training course. So even when they're starting use, occasionally just handling them, maybe even after class, just handling them for a little bit and then giving them a treat so they can see that handling can offer a variety of things. They can be restrained for it, or they can just be handled, or they can move to cages. So just kind of giving them a variety of experiences. So we try to give them a few weeks with us before But if not, we do it throughout the duration of them being on our protocol.
Thank you. We've got more questions. Next one, please tell us how you make sock jackets for the rats.
The sweaters and socks. So we took longer, so I think they were for kids, but they were like knee-high socks, so they were longer than a normal sock, but not as long as like a knee-high sock for an adult. And made sure that and that way we also got the cute little hearts and stripes and things. So we took a sock, we cut off the toe end of it, and then like kind of put a rat next to it, or the rat we were planning on using with that, and guessed where we would need to put the holes for the legs. A couple times we had to modify this a little bit, but had the rat go in, and it was made sure that the sock would be long enough to cover their tail and still be comfortable for them. And we noticed that it only takes a couple minutes to make them actually. I would definitely test drive different types of socks depending on the size of your rats and see how that works. But it does tend to not only make them cute and easier to handle for people who are afraid, but it seems to really calm them down as well.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question asks, how do you mark individual guinea pigs for their 3-technique limit per week?
Since we have such few guinea pigs, we only have those 8 guinea pigs that I mentioned, and guinea pig labs, there's not too many of them on campus. So usually we write in our training log the name of the guinea pig and what technique was performed. I don't think we've ever had the opportunity to do more than 3 techniques on a guinea pig at one time, but the guinea pig log is a lot easier to read because it's names and it's only for 8 animals. So, and they're all different colors in our training core. I think I had a picture of 2 albino guinea pigs. That was fairly rare. We do have different colors, so they're a lot easier to tell apart than our mouse population. So we do use the names in the training log for that.
Thank you. Next question. What age and weight range do you target with mice and rats before you start using the animals for training classes?
We don't have a specific weight and age range that we use. We do make sure all of the animals obviously are weaned, unless we get a special request. We have a lot of different things on our protocol. So if somebody needs a neonate, specifically pup for training in intraperitoneal injections in a neonate pup for a mouse, we usually get those specially transferred. But we can use those for those situations. But for our normal colony, we usually make sure they're obviously at least at 21. We have a 21-day marker for being weaned. But usually beyond that, they're, I'd say, about 2 or 3 months old for the mice, and similar for the rats as well before they're really being used, and around, I'd say, 20, 25 grams for mouse.
Thank you for your answer, Kaile. Our next question asks, how do you address compassion fatigue with staff and researchers? And do you address it?
That's actually one of my pet projects outside of this presentation, but I am running a peer-to-peer support group for compassion fatigue through the University of Michigan Unit for Laboratory Animal Medicine. And this will soon, I just started this about 6 months ago or so, but we started with partnering with our counselor program at the University of Michigan. We found a few counselors, I think we have 2, that say they are fully comfortable talking about animal research and the effects it can have without being overly negative or impacted by what we say. So we offered that to our technicians who are maybe having a especially difficult time with compassion fatigue. But other than that, once a month, I run a group for someone that's being affected by compassion fatigue can come by and share their stories. Again, it's peer run, so I kind of encourage or try to facilitate the discussion instead of just leading it. and people can share their experiences. We go around campus to make sure I can get to everyone at some point. And we're also we're looking at creating a memorial event, so an annual memorial event generally for animals in research. And we're actually also planning on making a small memorial garden. Nothing too obvious, just a small garden with a bench that we can think about the animals. We might have a small statue. We've had people put, for a while, we had a traveling memory board where people could put anonymous memories they had of the animals, see that it was being acknowledged by other staff members. So that's one of our main topics in the past year that we're really working on for our technicians. The capacity support group, I'd really recommend. Sometimes I have only a few people show up, and the last one I had over 20, and some management staff showed up as well. I will say I'm thinking of creating 2 groups for the different hierarchies of our staff, just so people feel fully comfortable actually sharing how they're feeling, because sometimes it's a little daunting if your boss is there, but so far I've had no issues.
Thank you. Our next question asks, the sit-in class, how often and how long are they? Who does them, and are they assigned a schedule?
This is a more kind of casual part of our program. We do it, I try to do it at least a few times with our animals. So the trainer will grab them from our colony and place them on the cart in a different location. So our cart has 2 shelves. So usually the second shelf will put the animals that haven't been used yet. I'm usually sitting next, they'll either be on the cart where the other animals are, or a lot of times I'll have the rats next to me. It's a little easier to fit the caging that way, next to where I'm giving the lecture, but there's no really set schedule. We just try to do it a few times until the animals seem a little calmer or they've been in our colony for a few weeks. But we make sure the training staff are the ones who do this, and we don't really document it. Well, we will write sometimes just handling if we were handling them for acclimation training afterwards once we bring them in the room. But that's just something that I've noticed a specific impact on our rat colony, and since it is a smaller colony and they are named, so it's a little easier to keep track of, oh, it looks like Selma's really getting acclimated to the room. But yeah, that one's still kind of a little bit more subjective.
Thank you, Kaile. Our next question asks, is there a maximum number of procedures your training animals can undertake, or is it all time-based, whatever takes place within a year? It goes on to say, I'm wondering primarily about the more invasive procedures, such as tail vein injections, saphenous sampling, submandibular sampling, retroorbital injections, etc.
Well, I will say for anything invasive such as surgery, we normally don't recover our animals from our surgery classes, so they only go through actual invasive surgeries like a laparotomy once. But for the tail vein and the submandibular bleeds and things like that, we do mark their tails differently with a red marker, so we know that they were, and we put that in our log. And with those animals, we are very particular about trying to rotate them a little bit, with a little bit of wider gap. They are definitely not used for even handling for that week period, but they are given the week, and the 3 techniques for tail vein, for example, do count the tail poke. So if they tried to get tail vein access and weren't successful, that counts as one technique. And for each session, for if we were bleeding from a tail vein, we do only allow once per session for actual successful blood from the animal before the animal is given that week vacation.
All right. Our next question asks, could you tell me a few of the simplest ways to restrain rats for blood collection?
Oh, well, it does depend on what site that you're getting the blood from for the animals. We do have tail vein restrainers that we get, I believe they're from Restraint Scientific, that we use if we're getting tail vein, doing tail vein injections or bleeds, that very simply hold the animal and allow you to pull the tail and have it at the proper angle for those. But other than that, I do know some people that will use towels instead of the shoe covers that we showed. We generally just kind of use our hands, depending on the size of the rat, to restrain them. But again, I think Braintree Scientific does have some really good holders for, like, for example, tail vein. For things like anything else that you would need, we do just use our hands. A lot of the times, I noticed rats are a little calmer than mice, so we haven't had too many issues restraining them. We've also used decapa cones, the plastic cones that have, and we cut a hole at the end if they don't already have them, that can restrain them in like a plastic bag-like thing, but they still have a hole for their nose. So we've had some success with those as well. You have to make sure they're sterile.
Thank you for that answer. Next question, how many maximum techniques do you perform on your rats?
For the rats, they still, everything in our colony has the 3 techniques and then a week break rule. And again, it's the same thing. If we're doing surgeries, unless it's a spay-neuter surgery, we don't normally recover our animals. So if they're in surgery, that's their final procedure. We don't usually do those until the animals need to leave the colony for whatever reason, but they are still following the 3 technique. And that does count attempts at gavage, attempts at tail vein, things like that. Anything that was stressful and an attempt at a technique counts as a technique.
Thank you, Kaile. Next question. I want to ask if there are any differences between conventional and transgenic animal enrichment.
For our colony, there's not. We do the enrichment the same for all of our animals. We don't have really any immunocompromised issues to worry about. If there is in our general population any changes in enrichment because of transgenic animals, it has to be in the protocol of the lab. I've never really heard of the need for much different enrichment. I will say all of our food products are, besides the fruit and veggies for the guinea pigs and rabbits, are sterile and packaged from places like BioServe or things like that. So we make sure that they come into the colony very clean. But we don't really have much different enrichment types for any of the animals in the training corps. They kind of run the gamut on the database.
Thank you. Next question. Is hands-on training required at your facility for research staff? And do you complete competency assessments for your staff after training?
That's a great question. Yes, so they first go through online modules, and then they have to have hands-on training with us. There are several classes. There's an animal room procedures class where they learn how to use our flow hood and how to do proper micro-isolator technique to make sure our animals stay SPF or specific pathogen free. And they also have to, if they're working with rats and mice, go through our in-person rat and mouse class where they have to demonstrate 3 times that they can properly restrain the animals. Also, if they're going to be doing injections, that we allow them to practice injections with us there as well. So they do have to pass their online modules, and the trainer has to sign off on them passing the hands-on portion. And I will say there has been a couple times when we couldn't pass somebody because we weren't comfortable with them working with animals, and they'll come back most of the time. We have open labs, what we call as well, where the lab staff can ask for specific training in, for example, oral gavage, and we'll just get out animals and all of the supplies, have a trainer there, and teach them hands-on. But yes, they do have to prove competency and restraint for the rats and mice before they're allowed on their protocol.
Thank you for your answer, Kaile. Our next question asks, are your rat condos IBC?
I apologize. I'm not quite sure. I feel like I know what that means. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm not quite sure what that means. They are made from Allentown caging, and they have been safety tested and things like that. I'm not 100% on what that means. If they could clarify that, I can answer that a little better.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question asks, can you give me more ideas for mice enrichment? Do you just use commercially bought items?
Oh, that's a great question. That's been one of our main questions when we've been implementing all of these new enrichment devices and things. What is really great for a mouse? What we found is, above all else, mice prefer to nest. Giving you any other option, the most enriching thing we can give for them is nesting material. I personally have found the best enrichment type for them is giving them a nestlet or a cotton square and EnviroDry, or that crinkly brown paper. They get to weave a nest and really create that thermodynamic environment inside the nest to keep them really warm and keep them hidden as well. They'll usually make it right in front where our husbandry staff is trying to health check them. Other than that, we do use like paper towel tubes and toilet paper tubes. We had a veterinary resident here that sent off the glue from those to a lab to assess for toxicity and safety, and they came back as safe to use for rodents. So we autoclave those, and we offer those as little huts or chew huts for our mice as well. We offer the shelters. We've offered paper bags, but mostly they really like those toilet paper tubes, and again, nesting material, anything they can use to weave. So you could use toilet paper and I would definitely autoclave it, and some of that crinkle bedding. I know there's these Enviro packs that they have the crinkle bedding or crinkle nesting material inside a cotton-like bag, and that seems to join both of those very well. But I really think nesting is the #1 enrichment for mice.
Okay, we have 2 more questions for the day. This one asks, do you find that rats like being in the socks? Does it not stress them by them being put into the socks? And is this good welfare, putting them in the socks to help humans not being so scared of the rats?
We've actually found that they like them. Again, we don't do this too often. This is an extreme case of somebody being very phobic of the rats. But we have found that they actually tend to crawl in themselves once they know what we're doing. But even the first time, we'll just put them in. They're usually, their rats before we do this are acclimated to us. So they're handler acclimated. And they don't struggle or they don't try to get out, right? So they just kind of lay down. Usually they fall asleep in them. So we haven't seen any outward signs of stress. So again, it's not done very often, but when it is, they don't seem very stressed out by it at all. In fact, they'll kind of crawl in it, and it's kind of hard to get, like the shoe cover, sometimes it's kind of hard to get them out. But I will say our animals are hand tamed before we do this. So we don't do this with the animals that aren't hand tamed.
Thank you. Our last question of the day asks, how to hold a rat for oral or other kind of injections after surgery in their dorsal region. Do you do it on the back?
If we have to do like oral gavage that way, usually we'll hold the rats under their front arms and hold them up like that for oral gavage in a tight restraint in the hand. I don't, if you have a sutured incision there, you just have to be careful of where you place your hand. But that's the most effective way I found, if you put your hand under their arms and kind of hold them straight like that, to get that really straight access point for like a gavage or some sort of oral thing like that. And this is actually another great point that we use for our shoe cover restraint. If you have an area of the rat that you can't put pressure on, this kind of gives you a bit more leeway on where you put your hand, because the shoe cover is already kind of restraining them a little bit, so you don't have to have such a tight restraint with your hand. So I would definitely look into different restraint devices in general. Again, I know there are a few companies. I know off the top of my head, I'm thinking Braintree Scientific is one of the ones we use a lot. They have different restraint devices, so it might be worth it to look into something like that.
If there are no more questions today, I would like to once again thank Senior Training Specialist Kaile Bennett for her presentation. Kaile, do you have any final and closing comments?
No, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope it was informative and that you took something from it, from our little colony that can help you out. And I always like to stress that animal welfare is obviously our #1 concern, and really displaying that for our lab staff is, I think, is of vital importance. The better we can take care of the animals, the better our science and our research is. So always keep that in mind when you're working.
I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today and for their interesting questions. We would like to thank LabRoots for today's educational webcast. This webcast can be viewed on demand through July 2017. LabRoots will alert you via email when it is available for replay. We encourage you to share that email with colleagues who may have missed today's live event. This is Christina from labroots.com. We'll see you here next time. Goodbye.